Hello, and welcome to the Unsung Cyber Hero Adventures TV network. Today's show focuses on answering the question, who are the cyber criminals deploying ransomware, and how are they adapting in the COVID-19 digital universe? Stay tuned to find out. I'm your host, Gary Berman. Our mission is to shine the light on the people and organizations who keep us safe online while at work, home, and school, and to serve as a business-to-business networking platform for the cybersecurity and IT communities. We've learned that 55% of human communications is nonverbal. That's why we include a video feed, so that you have the option of seeing our guests or simply to just listen. That's also why we're called a TV network. We're all about information sharing and business-to-business networking. You never know who you're going to connect with and how you'll be able to maximize opportunities resulting from hearing from our guests. This is especially valuable now that the community's primary way of conducting business, conferences, has been put on hold for the foreseeable future. Our first guest is Christaan Beek. He manages threat intelligence research within McAfee's Office of the CTO. He leads research in advanced attacks and assists in cyberattack takedown operations. In previous roles, Beek was Director of Threat Intelligence in McAfee Labs and Director of Incident Response and Forensics at Foundstone, Intel Security's Forensic Services arm. Hey, Christiaan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Gary.
Our next guest is Dave Piscitello. Dave has been involved in internet technology for over 40 years. He's authored books on internet and remote access, including Understanding Voice over Internet Protocol Security. He publishes articles regularly on security, DNS, anti-phishing, malware, internet policy, and privacy. He maintains a highly active, insightful, and entertaining info site as the Security Skeptic. Dave is a partner at Interisle Consulting Group. Hey, Dave, welcome to the show.
Good morning. How are you today?
Good. Thanks, Dave. You know, as you know, my brain kind of lives in the superhero world, as the creator of the Cyberhero Adventures, Defenders of the Digital Universe. So I'll use a superhero trope and ask you, tell us your origin story.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear whether it was me or Christiaan. Yeah.
That's you, Dave.
My origin story.
Yep.
So I came out of Villanova University in 1974, and I was actually interested in becoming a philosophy professor. I was really not that particularly interested in computer science at the time. It was relatively nascent. Most of the work I had been doing was on mainframes, and I got a job that I used to pay for graduate school with a mainframe manufacturer, and sort of evolved from working on microprocessor and mini computer systems to remote communication systems that are IBM or Burroughs or whoever. So I sort of learned networking from data link level up. Once people started building networks, I got involved in routing. I got involved in open systems interconnection and TCP/IP, and then sort of morphed from that into working at Bell Communications Research on high-speed data and trying to figure out how to actually satisfy an emerging TCP and IP marketplace. Got involved in network management. From network management, got involved in security and cryptography. From cryptography and security, got involved in remote access. And so it's just been kind of an evolution of, oh wow, that's a really interesting shiny object. Let's go play with that. In the late 1990s, I spent a fair amount of time investigating spyware. If you remember spyware. And that was kind of the natural migration or redirection into cybersecurity, moving away from being involved in building defense to going into cyber investigations. So that's really where I've been spending a lot of my time since the mid 2000s. Joined ICANN as a security technology advocate, spent an awful lot of time trying to understand and reshape policy for the main name system and registration services, and left there in 2018 because I think there were better ways for me to apply that knowledge, trying to move things forward outside that community than inside. So.
And, one of the really interesting recurring themes, that I've had the privilege of listening and learning from, some of the smartest people in the world in cybersecurity is this almost insatiable curiosity. When did you realize, that you had this curiosity and this, kind of passion for technology? How old were you?
I probably was a late bloomer by comparison to most people today. I mean, my focus really wasn't on computers and and technology. To me, it was really logic, like understanding why people thought linearly, why people thought non-linearly, how to try to put together and piece together all the elements of an investigation just became more and more fascinating to me as I got deeper and deeper involved. There's such an interesting social element because of the predominance of social engineering in nearly all the attacks. So there are so many different factors in how this all works. More recently, the real interesting aspect is just that that old law enforcement mantra, follow the money. It's like you look and you say, why are people doing this? Why do ICANN registrars run their business the way they run their business? Follow the money. Why do criminals go after certain targets? Follow the money. And when you start following the money, you really do start to see a lot of the causal causation, and then you get involved in, okay, if that's what's causing it, how do we mitigate it? And so that's really been more of the motivation for me and the background than what I imagine Christiaan and most people who are in much younger generations than I am.
I mean, you've touched on so many important topics that we'll be able to delve into, social engineering being an important one. And coincidentally, one of our comics is called Follow the Money, all about financial services and things like that. So thanks for that great background, and thanks for being a real life unsung cyber hero. Speaking of which, Christiaan, thank you for joining the show. So please share with our audience, your origin story.
All right. Well, I think you're right, David. My age, I was like 12 when I got firstly in touch with like a Commodore 64. Really loved the technology. Like I spent my Saturday afternoons writing my own programs, little games, drinking a lot of Coke to do bug fixing, and then switched over to Amiga. And at some point, I think I went to like a small conference, because those were the days where you really have to build your own computers and nothing was actually sold complete. So you grabbed parts here and there. And then actually there was a group of people staying together, and I was like, hey, what are these guys doing? And there was like a bunch of magazines, and I saw like, hey, they're called Hacktick. I was like, hey guys, what are you doing? And actually they explained they were hacking into phone systems and doing computer research. And I was like, oh, that's very cool. So actually, I completely bought their year subscription, brought it home, and started to read and learn about it. And I was like, oh man, this is so cool. I want to learn about this. So I think I was like 15, 16 when I really started to pay attention to security. So I joined military service, did a lot of computer stuff over there, of course. And after that, I was really interested in this hacking stuff. So I bought this book, Hacking Exposed, from Foundstone at the time. Did all these sysadmin classes, but also kept on learning in my free time about computers and security. And at some point there was like this little advertisement about like, hey, Ethical Hacking Group is hiring hackers. So I was like, you know what? Let's give it a shot. And actually I applied, and well, I got the job, and I was the first Windows hacker in their team, because it was all Unix and BSD guys over there. So Was painful in the beginning because I had to prove myself, because Windows was, well, not the favorite OS for hackers. But managed successfully, did a lot of penetration testing, had very cool jobs there, very nice challenges. I think at some point, an incident happened and they were asking like, hey, did you ever do some forensics on stuff? And I was like, no, but I'm always willing to learn. So started to do some forensics and found out, yeah, that's really an area I really want to specialize myself, because cybersecurity is really like very broad, the specialism, what you can do. So I started to focus on forensics, took classes, and got my graduation for that. And so for many years, operated in the forensics field. And then at some point, I presented some research at Black Hat conferences in Europe. And then this volcano in Iceland erupted. So we were all stuck in Barcelona. And I hit into one of the guys from Foundstone, I'll never forget, Carrick Dooley. And we had a little chat, and he was asking what I was doing. And I was like, do you want to join Foundstone and actually lead the forensics team? And I remember I had that book, Hacking Exposed for Foundstone, on my shelf. And now I got the opportunity to get a job over there. It's like a dream coming true. And starting there, we got acquired by McAfee at some point in Foundstone. And like through the years, I really grew from like leading incident response to doing malware analysis, doing threat analysis. And actually, I ended up writing a chapter in the book of Hacking Exposed as well. So yes, so far, if I look back, it's just like a dream come true. Like the things I may achieve, the people I work with, the people that have mentored me. So, and I'm still passionate about the challenges and the work I'm doing. So that's in a nutshell my story.
Wow, that's super cool. You know, and I just want to kind of build on that because, like you, I sought out books, and the first book that I got was called Cybersecurity for Dummies. And so I said, okay, perfect. I'm like the Forrest Gump of cybersecurity. Up till a few years ago, I knew nothing about any of this stuff, but everything about what it meant to be the victim, of a multi-million-dollar series of cyber crimes, So I got this book, really excited. And I'm telling you, Christiaan, 10 pages into the book, I was lost. So I found the author, this great guy named Rick Howard from Palo Alto Networks. He's a CISO at the time. And I told him that, and he started laughing. So I'm just like laughing with this guy, And so finally I asked him, like, why are you laughing so hard? He says, well, it's not really for beginners. Then why do you call it Cybersecurity for Dummies? And that's when I realized there had to be a better way to distill complicated information. David, you've written, a lot about many different topics. Maybe you can share with our audience, real life story of ransomware, cybercrime, and kind of, what happened or what were the consequences, and most importantly, like, what are the lessons learned? And if you can't reveal the name, that's cool.
So I usually, got involved in looking at what we would call conspiracy of domains, a conspiracy of assets that criminal actors would use in the perpetration of a ransomware attack. So my orientation was not so much in the same vector as Christiaan's. We were looking at okay, how do we actually understand what the criminal infrastructure is that is driving the ransomware attack, and especially during my time at ICANN and a little bit since, what we were interested in was what were the delivery mechanisms. So we would be gathering, the sets of domains, the sets of internet addresses, what ASNs, where were name servers being hosted, where were mail servers being hosted, to deliver the spam that was actually carrying the lure, or the payload of the ransomware. So my orientation really was, how do we dismantle this typically global infrastructure? And that was always a really challenging exercise. So let's take, for example, a ransomware attack that focuses on a healthcare facility, hospital, or some other healthcare service. where is it originating from? You know, what kind of techniques were they using in order to sustain the presence of the the download site? How were they transmitting mail? What were the characteristics of it? Christian's orientation perhaps is much more, what the payload looks like, how you react to it, how you mitigate it. And then there's actually a third vector, which is, okay, how do you actually recover from it? So, people like Christian were part of, a collaborative team of, private actors, private sector actors, commercial companies like Foundstone, perhaps brand offenders because their brand was being used as part of the social engineering, law enforcement, registries, registrars, hosters, people who are running large infrastructures like Cloudflare, and you would have to put everybody together and try to essentially first build the picture of that topology, of that infrastructure. And then you had to figure out how you connected the dots between all of that information that you had, made it evidentiary quality, and then understand what jurisdictions you had to bring into play to go after the perpetrators that you identified. And this is no mean task, because the definition of a crime in cyberspace is non-uniform across jurisdictions. And in order to get something like a global network dismantled, you have to do it in a single stroke. And so it's almost like a Flag Day of changing over from one protocol to another. It's not something you want to do lightly, and it's not something you can do easily, because in order to get every jurisdiction to act, you have to have court orders that are relevant, issued, in each jurisdiction. You've got to coordinate jurisdictions using what's called mutual legal assistance treaty, which involves, people essentially agreeing to cooperate, by providing evidence or providing support, outside of the nation that's actually trying to take action. Typically, these things take 6 to 18 months. So, in the meantime, you've got, this enormous rolling, avalanche of ransomware that's just being piled on, and those networks are supporting not just one ransomware attack. They're usually supporting, a succession of them. And in many cases, they're supporting customers. Their ransomware as a service is something that is quite lucrative. So the people that I was involved in going after weren't the end customers, so to speak. They were the people who were providing an infrastructure. The amount of effort that had to go into play to get a single action that was maybe directed by Europol or Interpol, executed, was a multi-month, often sometimes a multi-year activity. And so that's one of the fascinating parts of trying to pursue something like ransomware. But I'd like to let Christian chime in on his end too. So.
Okay. Yeah. Honestly, if you look at the developments you see in the ransomware, like in the past, and I always call them the spray and pray they pay attacks, where people were like massively sending out emails with an attachment and where people try to click on, and hopefully people will start paying the ransomware. It's really focusing far more now on targeted ransomware attacks. So really the criminals go after companies where they think they have credentials from, or they bought the credentials from the underground. They go into the company, they steal the information. That's a new angle we have seen over the last couple of months. They put in the ransomware, and the moment the ransomware breaks out, they ask for money, right? That's the whole business model. But the new thing is what you're seeing popping up now is like, look, if you do not pay, we will leak your data. And also what you see is that even if you don't pay, because you can recover from backups, they will auction your data. Like it's a new angle, a new vector we're seeing popping up over the last couple of months. And like the amount of attacks happening on a daily basis, like look, I think we're almost back to the days of CryptoLocker and CryptoWall many years ago, but the volume is really, really increasing. And it's I think, a worrisome trend. And as you mentioned, David, yes, we are involved as a private partner with law enforcement. Like, we are co-founder of the No More Ransom initiative, where we said, we have to stop these guys. So as companies and law enforcement, if we can build decryption tools for certain ransomware families, we offer them for free, because that's a way you can actually prevent money going into criminal pockets. So there's a lot being done.
Let me, Christiaan, let me just pause on that incredibly important point. Forgive the interruption, but is this the kind of program that McAfee's offering at no charge, where you'll, let's say in the healthcare ecosystem pertaining, to COVID-19, that you just provide, code that a healthcare institution can use to protect itself from particular strains of ransomware?
No, it's different. The normal ransomware initiative is really like about decryption tools. So, for example, if you are hit by a certain family of ransomware, there are several partners in this initiative. So it's not only McAfee, but some other companies as well. And all these research teams, they build decryption tools if it's possible to decrypt that ransomware. And we offer them for free. So a victim, like for example, if a healthcare institute got hit by a certain family, they can go to this website, they will upload the ransom note, and the website will identify probably which ransomware they've been hit by, and if the decryption tool is available, yes or no.
What is the website, so our audience, can take advantage of this? And this sounds, incredibly generous, and helpful. What website should they go to?
Sure, the website is nomoreransom.org. And it's supporting multiple languages around the world. And also for every country that is actually affiliate, we also have like a local police form in it. So people can actually also file a complaint, because the more we get, the more complaints are filed with like law enforcement, the more we can act, the more resources will be made available to stop this threat.
Wow, that's a fantastic service, and we in our comic, we created a character called Wilbur Wannacry, because it's an interesting thing to try to communicate the complexity of what we're talking about to people who are not technical. It's just hard to get their heads around it. So we anthropomorphize hacks, and so Wilbur is this sort of creepy looking cockroach, kind of, a character, and he works with Sonny, the social engineer, and Ivan, the identity thief, as a way to distill ones and zeros into something that people can, find engaging and interesting. And so, on that topic, David, you had mentioned earlier the incredibly important idea of social engineering. Maybe you can share with our audience a little bit about definitionally, like what that is, and then, some real life use cases of how it's implemented.
Sure. So social engineering is basically, it's like psychological operations. You want to compel someone to do something that they wouldn't otherwise do if there wasn't some sort of fear or uncertainty or doubt or time urgency. And so people have seen this before in phishing attacks. You get an email that purports to be from your bank, and it says, your mortgage is overdue, or your debt your debt is come due, or some other financial stressor. And so what people have done in the past is they read the mail, and it says, please visit this link and log in and correct this problem immediately. They do that really quickly. They click on the link. The link is not actually the bank, but it's some criminal site where they disclose their credentials, and they're hooked. The other attack vector will convince someone to click on an attachment. This is a very common way to deliver any sort of malware download. It's very, very common in ransomware. Sometimes the file, the dropper file, so to speak, that comes down, as a result of clicking, is much more than just a single threat. It could be what we used to call an advanced persistent threat, or something that could just go and pervasively attack across a network and not only compromise one machine, but many. And so, social engineering is very powerful because there are so many ways to evoke some sort of response that is not well thought out rather. Almost anything that gets delivered with COVID today is going to capture somebody's attention. Impersonating a company or an employee's human resources that says, you've been laid off. Please log in to qualify for your benefits is something that we've seen recently. The other attacks that have all sorts of different ways to attract people aren't all necessarily ransomware. There's a fair amount of business email compromise where people are purporting to or impersonating a vendor, and yes, we can deliver your N95 masks. So you can impersonate, you can insert yourself in a transaction where you essentially redirect funds transfer to pay for the masks, or whatever other healthcare device. So COVID's is just the most recent reason for people to do things without thinking through what their actions are going to result in. Catastrophes, Katrina, Matthew, 9/11, lots of Red Cross, phishing as examples. So impersonating a charity. I mean, or impersonating, we talked about, the employment vector, we've talked about banking, we've talked about, social events. There's almost anything that will make someone go and do something that isn't in their best interest because they haven't thought it through is fodder for a social engineer.
Wow, and plus, I think human beings are genetically wired to be helpful. We're social creatures. We want to be helpful, and so when there's an opportunity for that, presented in a malicious way, people bite. So Christiaan, in your experience, you have a lot of data points. How many data points do you and McAfee have, globally that inform, your system so that what do you track the most pertaining to, let's just say ransomware, in this case? How do you do that?
We have like a few hours? No, just joking, but we have millions of sensors, of course, but if you look at my team, if you talk about ransomware over the years, you want to study about what is happening. Like, if you really look, let's take it to like a traditional virus. Like if you take the flu, for example, every year you can get a vaccine or a shot, but every year the flu is actually mutating to a new variant or something like that. So people are breaking their heads about like, can't we just create like a super vaccine that actually is mitigating against the flu? This is how we look at ransomware as well. Like, if you look at ransomware, what are the components, the Lego bricks of a malware and ransomware, and what does it need to actually be successful? And if you study those kind of patterns, those kind of ways of how it interacts and behaves with different operating systems, that's actually where you look for solutions. That's where we look for ways of proactively blocking ransomware itself. The trend we're seeing is that we're kindly, I would say, very successful in actually detecting and blocking those kind of threats. But now you see, where we actually highlighted a few minutes ago about these targeted ransomware attacks. Well, if the cyber adversaries have your crown jewels, they have like the keys of the kingdom, they have your admin password, and you're inside your network, they can shut down security solutions. They can do whatever they want. So this is a new trend balance, we try to see like, hey, okay, if we have a great detection on the one side, but these guys have like the passwords, what can we do? And this is actually I would say the challenge we're having at the moment, and we're looking at like, is there some more we can do to support, I would say, companies with this issue?
You know, one of the interesting things that I've listened and learned about is the challenges that small to medium enterprises have, you know, pertaining to ransomware and all types of cybercrime. You know, Christiaan, does McAfee's network of inputs, you know, segment small to medium enterprises? And if so, you know, are you seeing an uptick in ransomware of that, local governments, you know, that kind of thing?
If you look at our telemetry, that's actually our guideline of what we're seeing. I would say it's now mostly on the enterprise side where the major attacks are happening, because that's where the big money is. Where I would say the more individuals, like your family, right, your family members or small businesses, are less impacted. We see really like underground shops offering remote desktop credentials. So you buy them maybe for $50, and then you have access
Wait,
to a hospital.
did you just say you can buy ransomware code for $50?
No, that's not the code. Yes, you can buy that too, but I can say you can buy a username and password for maybe a hospital in the US for $50. You go to the hospital and actually you launch ransomware, you ask $500,000. That's your profit model, right? And actually this is happening.
Wow. And David, you know, given your 40-year career, you know, throughout this entire ecosystem, um, you know, what would your counsel be to our audience about whether or not to pay the ransom?
So I don't think there's a single audience, and there's a problem here, and so let's think about how we've answered that question 5 years ago from the way we might answer it today. 5 years ago, we said don't pay the ransom. We recommended to people, you know, the best defense is to back up your data, because if you have the data, then they have less leverage, because you can recover. As Christiaan pointed out today, they're selling the data. This is ransomware is now an exfiltration technique more so than just extortion, and so now you have to start to think about what's it costing me to try to try to defend against this. A small business, you know, if you're putting up a firewall, you're running your antivirus, you're doing all the recommended small business measures. That's a fair chunk of money, but it pales in comparison to having a resilient network, highly compartmentalized in a 700-bed hospital. And so the what is at risk? Remember, follow the money. What is at risk is disproportionate, and it's and so what we would recommend to somebody who's small business, I think you'd still say don't pay the ransom, but before you say that, you have to say, is there going to be a regulatory consequence? Are you going to be fined because of violation of a Privacy Act? So there's so many permutations of what to tell people. Obviously, one of the most important things to recognize is that you're dealing with criminals. Trusting the criminal to actually give you the decrypting key is itself a risk. Understanding what the cost of the disclosure is also a factor. So there's so many different things to try to recommend to people. Right? The smartest thing to do is to be prepared to have some resiliency in the data that you hold you hold precious. Educate your employees. Put up as many functional defenses as you can. and be prepared for the worst.
Well, you know, on that upbeat note, maybe one of the interesting things now would be David and Christian, for you to, you know, ask each other some questions. Is there anything, you know, you've sort of wondered about that you can ask one another, and it would be interesting?
Well, I think to make the point for like what David you were telling about paying the ransomware, I totally agree. Uh, let's take the example you took from a hospital. Of course, we say do not pay, because we see also, if you follow the money, that the cyber criminals are spending that money in underground markets where they fund other crime like drugs or other things. But at the same time, like where maybe in some companies, if you follow the CIA triangle, confidentiality, integrity, availability, for most companies, confidentiality, integrity are the number ones. Availability, okay, it can be lower of priority. In a hospital, no way. It's all about availability, 24/7 healthcare. So if you're shut down by ransomware and it will take you maybe a week to recover from a backup, or maybe 2 days for paying, I can imagine that the decision is being made to pay for it. But still, it's I would say it's always a difficult challenge and advice to give, yes or no.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, one of the other really kind of interesting and important aspects, you know, of this whole discussion of ransomware is what you said earlier, Christian, about their morphing. You know, just like a real life virus. Which, by the way, we created a character called Vernon the Virus, you know, for this, and it's uncanny how many linguistic, you know, similarities there are between cybersecurity and healthcare. I mean, just the terms, you know, virus, a bug, cyber hygiene, you know, so on and so forth. What's your recommendation to our audience on how to communicate best practices, you know, internally? Let's say a large enterprise, you know, how do you get your team members, your employees, your various stakeholders, you know, on the same page about cybersecurity?
If I look at our company, I think our office of the CISO does a great job in creating awareness. So frequently communicating if there's real actual threats, they inform us nicely, and they do exercises. So we sometimes get like a real phishing email, which we have to report, and we learn from that, of course. And I think that's a great way to educate our employees.
What percentage, on average, of people in an enterprise, and this is to either one of you, do you happen to know, actually click on phishing links?
That's a trick question.
Well, no, that's an uninformed question, but you know.
Well, a lot of it depends on on how the organization has historically approached cybersecurity education, so security awareness, and it also has there's a certain technology familiarity influence in the data. So companies that are more tech savvy tend to have lower incidences of of people who are going to fall for stranded traveler spam, or 419 spam, because it's part of their vernacular. It's part of what they read about, and so even without the corporate security awareness, because they're involved in technology, their appetite for understanding and learning about things like cyber threats is higher. What I can't tell you an exact number. I can give you some examples. So when in companies I worked for in the past, we've done a fish me exercise. What we see is about a fourfold decrease. So let's say that 50% of people clicked. Once they were made aware and they were provided with education, and we had repeat exercises, we could sometimes see a drop to 12 to 15%.
Wow.
Which is spectacular because people are now aware. Now, in other organizations, we find that it doesn't make that much of an impression. There are also people who are basically recidivist, that they just don't learn. Yeah. And so what do you do with the person who doesn't learn, especially if the person who doesn't learn is a member of the executive team? Yeah. Yeah. So there's no real simple answer to a whole lot of this. One of the things that I hope is that as a global society, we have all become so much more aware of virology through COVID. Everyone is learning something. Everyone is understanding something about what the value of a mask is, what the value of social distancing is, what the value of hygiene is, washing your hands correctly. We now have a really rich set of new analogs to present to people, so that they can click and understand. I understand what he's talking about because I remember this COVID thing, and that's exactly what I did for COVID, and I didn't get COVID, so I'm not going to get this particular kind of infection if I practice the same thing.
Wow, that's interesting. Both of you had mentioned the word global. Christiaan, what have you seen from your very unique perch, because you have telemetry from everywhere around the world? Are there regional differences of who's much more likely to be attacked, through ransomware or other malware? I mean, give our audience a sense about, some geography around the world.
Sure. If I would say, if you looked a few years ago, you would see that ransomware actors were actually targeting what we call Tier 1 countries. Countries in the world that have enough funding, economics, that actually were able to pay the ransom. I would say now it's really changing more into sectors and interesting targets. I think the last month we saw a new angle happening into the ICS sector, where a piece of ransomware was developed to target the office environment of companies with SCADA systems. So it's diverse, I would say. You can't pinpoint directly hey, it's really, yes, it's a global threat, but also we see focus on sectors, and actually they're looking at these sectors hey, who are the top contributors in this sector, and let's go after those guys because probably they have money.
Wow, that's interesting. So as we're wrapping up here, Christiaan, what piece of advice, if you had to distill it down to one, and David's made a great, very logical case that all of this stuff is so complicated, it's hard to answer this question, but what would a best practice be that you'd recommend to our audience to stay safe from ransomware specifically?
What I would say is that don't be ignorant that doesn't happen to you, but understand that everybody has a piece of information, and it takes only one criminal mind to make money out of it, and you have to realize that and be prepared for that.
Well, that's good advice, David. And also, what one piece of advice would you like to share with our audience?
Well, Christiaan picked the perfect one. It's hard to beat that. I think it's always important to pause and read carefully what you're receiving. Don't always give in to the impulse to try to remedy something the minute it appears. Be thoughtful about what you've received. Read it carefully. There's all sorts of cues. Typically in most of the mail that's composed, it doesn't necessarily have to look perfect for the criminal to think it's right. But if it's the correspondence isn't exactly the kind of correspondence you expect from your organization or from your financial institution or from your friends, always be suspicious first. It's the old trust no one, mantra really does apply. It's even when I get mail from my wife, so I'm not going to necessarily say it's safe. I'm going to click it. If I get mail from people I've known for 50 years, I'm even less less likely, because they're in their 60s and they're probably not as techno savvy as all the people I work with on a daily basis. So, use your brain, before you use your keyboard. So.
Wow, that's a clever line. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that would amplify your mission, Dave?
My mission.
Yeah, because
um,
you have a big one. You're doing a lot of not-for-profit things, and you're a real thought leader for the industry.
I think it's really worthwhile. Staying informed, being engaged. In this time where people are very nervous about about law enforcement generally, I think it's important to understand that that there are there are people in law enforcement that that actually make a very, very big difference in our daily lives, and a lot of them are involved in cybercrime. So don't paint with one brush, and recognize that our society needs just people doing good things for each other. So.
And Christiaan, is there something else you'd like to add?
Well, honestly, on a daily basis, we try to make things secure, and honestly, not for ourselves alone, but also if you look at our kids and maybe our possible grandkids, internet and technology is fantastic, but we need to protect it, and actually we have to prepare a future for them. So I think that's a major, I would say, mission for myself and my team that we're passionate about, and that actually keeps us driving every day to do this.
Well, on that note, thanks so much to Christiaan and Dave for this wonderful interview. I could go on for hours and hours, but we have to say so long with one final question that's just for me on a personal note. David, who's your favorite superhero and why?
Oh wow. I'm old enough to remember buying the Marvel comics, for a dime, sitting, and so I think my first love was either Captain America or Iron Man. It's just going back to to basically the real origin stories, not the ones that have been been developed over the years. Just looking at the original ones. So I would probably say it would be Captain America. Yes.
Why, and why do you say that?
Because it was my first experience. I walked in, went to grab a candy. First time I saw a comic book. There was that, shield, and and red, white, and blue. And I'm a World War II, post World War II, kid, 5 years old. And it just had the impression.
Wow, that's cool. What about you, Christiaan? Who's your favorite superhero and why?
I think I would pick Iron Man, about the technology and all the stuff. Yeah, great character.
Some people give Elon Musk that kind of title. He's the current, I guess, Tony Stark, I think, is the character. You think Elon Musk rises to that level?
I'm not sure, but I think that the technology, his vision are inspiring. So it's yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks again to Christiaan and Dave for this incredible interview. To learn more, we'll have their contact information and other relevant information in the show notes. If you would like to be a guest on our show, just send an email to Gary at cyberheroes with an S, comics with an S.com. And we hope this helps. Bye.